It's in the tradition of the British royal family that they each put something of themselves, of their souls even, into their great houses and the grounds that surround them. For Prince Charles, Highgrove House in Gloucestershire is just such a special place. It's not a grand palace. It's not even very big. But Highgrove has been both an official residence and a refuge for him, a family home, and perhaps most importantly, it's where the prince has begun to put into practice his ideas about man's place in the natural world. The gardens, woods, parkland and farms are all run within a regime that works with nature, rather than with the aid of chemical fertilizers, pesticides or herbicides. Much is being done to improve the estate's natural habitats, and even the formal gardens have been carefully planned and planted, and the prince has done much of this himself. The effect on the resident wildlife has been startling. Prince Charles visits the hide where survival cameraman Maurice Tibbles is busy filming blue tits.
Oh, she's calling. I think she's coming in, sir. Oh, look, yeah. Wasn't that marvellous? All their mouths. God. Does she then teach them how to look for food?
Food, yeah. They go around in little family parties soon. They'll be feeding up in the tops of trees.
I suppose there's a mass of these caterpillars, isn't there?
There is it now, yeah, sure. And one shudders to think what would happen if they were, if we didn't have these little predators eating them.
So clever, isn't it, that subtle balance that nature manages?
That's why these nest boxes are a good thing. I mean, they take aphids off roses.
I'm all for that.
Yeah.
I keep trying to encourage ladybirds, but there never seem to be enough of them.
No, they're good.
Because all these sprays and the hedgerows, everything else on near them, I mean, they simply don't do any good at all, do they?
No, not really, no.
All the overwintering insects and so on.
Sure, they all have a purpose. They bring off these young just at the time when all the caterpillars are at their peaks.
Yes. They've all gone back to being quiet again.
Yes, and it's amazing. That's their...
Maurice Tibbles and his wife Carol spent 18 months filming the estate and its wildlife through the turning seasons of the year. Their story began towards the end of winter, as everything was about to burst into life. Food is left out for the birds, just as it is in millions of other gardens in Britain. It's a vital lifeline for wildlife, especially in hard winters. The 10-foot-high walls of the kitchen garden offer little protection against the cold. As winter draws to a close at Highgrove, the first signs of new life begin to emerge through the snow. Many houses have bird boxes. It's one of the best ways to encourage birds into the garden. Highgrove has 82, and tending to them has become one of the special duties of PC Tudor Davies. He's part of Highgrove's security team, but he's also a keen ornithologist, and he's been studying the estate's wildlife. The boxes are secured with wire rather than nails to protect the trees. This work has boosted the resident bird population, although the thrush does not take advantage of his nest boxes. Highgrove Estate consists of 3 fairly widely separated pieces of farmland in the process of being converted to a mixed organic enterprise. Snow means hard work keeping the lanes between them unblocked for farm machinery, as well as watering animals. The arrival of spring is heralded by the unmistakable sound of the rookery, where the breeding season begins well before the first leaves appear on the trees. These large, raucous birds are among the first to nest and breed. Their eggs will be laid before mid-March. It's the best time for Jemima Parry-Jones, a well-known expert on owls and other birds of prey, to set up a breeding program at Highgrove for a spectacular bird that has almost disappeared from our farms and countryside. The hayloft above the stables at Highgrove has been specially prepared for new residents. It's been estimated that fewer than 5,000 pairs of barn owls remain in the wild in Britain, a tiny fraction of their numbers even 50 years ago. Poisoning by pesticides, loss of their principal hunting grounds in long tussocky grass, and the disappearance of suitable stone-walled barns for nesting sites have all contributed to the drastic decline in numbers of the barn owl. There have been many barn owl reintroductions by well-meaning individuals, but simply releasing captive-bred owls is not the answer, and it's hoped that Jemima's scheme here will serve as a blueprint for future releases. Outside, the spring rains are beckoning frogs to one of the newly restored ponds near the house. The males are the first to arrive and croak to attract the females. Several thousand jelly-covered eggs are laid in clumps around the shallow edges of the pool. Amphibians like common frogs and smooth newts are declining in numbers. They are very susceptible to polluted water and need clean ponds with a strong growth of aquatic plants to thrive. The female smooth newt lays her eggs singly on the waterweed. Prince Charles has restored many of the estate's derelict ponds with the help of John Hughes of the Farming and Wildlife Advisory Group.
This is one of 6 that we've done now, isn't it?
It is, isn't it, I suppose, isn't it? When did we start? It was about 9 years ago.
9, 10, yes. Yes, 10 years ago my first farm started with you. This then was full of old rubbish,
Yes,
and then we...
Well, they're all full of old rubbish,
Yes,
really,
yes, they were. Well, it obviously was a horse wash, because you've got the stones runway in and then the runway out on the other side.
Yeah. But you've also put in, haven't you, some bits of
Yes,
duckweed.
We put in duckweed. We put in some starwort to try and get the water more pure. And then there's the water crowfoot out there in flower.
That's right.
It's nice to see. And there's some crested newts in here.
But have you noticed in the first one we did that an increase in bird life?
Yes, and there's more hen nested on there this year.
It has?
Yeah.
And the old duck has dropped in, and that sort of thing, presumably.
I suspect if we were to take a few more trees down that we don't want to here, we get ducks playing in here. Because they do like to be able to come in and go out with light either way.
And we might be able to take down some of these, I think, don't you?
Well, could do, I suppose, yes. Yes.
I mean, I thought I'd leave them to start with.
Although they do screen the farm buildings as you come in the drive, don't they?
But the whole point was make sure that the farm buildings look nice, so you don't have to screen them. At least I hope you noticed that, anyway. No, but that's very encouraging to have got some in there. So.
Rewarding.
But the extraordinary thing, I think, is how those newts went on surviving in that
little pond in the garden.
Conservation doesn't necessarily mean preserving everything. Trees are felled on the Highgrove estate, but in this case it's introduced larches which are being removed to make way for native broad-leaved species such as oak and ash. Spring is a busy time on the farms, and Prince William and Prince Harry regularly watch and even lend a hand with the lambing. They are encouraged to be aware of all aspects of farm life. The ewes at Highgrove give birth in the spring, the natural lambing period, rather than being forced to do so in midwinter. This female needs a hand with the arrival of the second of her twins. Spring in Britain is short, but a hectic time on the farms. Near the house, Prince Charles's favourite mare has just produced a foal. The horse was domesticated by man long ago, yet still retains much of its natural behaviour. Originally a plains animal, the horse and its foal stay close together at all times. It was the only way to protect its offspring against predators in its original wild state in wide, open places thousands of years ago. By now, a family of moorhens has moved in and produced chicks on one of the restored dew ponds. They're one of the first colonizers of new ponds, and it's a sign that the pond has been restored to its original natural state. The grass snake does not represent a threat to the chicks. It feeds mainly on frogs and newts, and it too is declining in numbers and dependent on clean ponds. It will lay its eggs in piles of rotting manure, where the resulting heat helps to incubate its clutch. And manure is one thing there is plenty of on an organic farm like Highgrove. As late spring brings Highgrove into blossom, the barn owls have successfully paired and mated. The female has laid 5 perfect white eggs over a period of 10 days. It's a good start to the captive release scheme, but it will be almost 5 weeks before they begin to hatch. The female does all the incubating herself. In the wild, food would be brought to her by her mate. In the hayloft, the owls are given dead chicks and mice. In the woodland garden, the pheasants too have been busy egg-laying. The male is brightly coloured and designed to be seen by other pheasants. The female is a mixture of subtle shades of brown, perfect camouflage while she's sitting on her nest. At this time of year, many birds in the woodland garden are nesting. Tudor Davies accompanies Prince Charles to show him the success of his work with the nest boxes.
26 occupied. But
How many actual nesting boxes are there?
there are 82 altogether.
82. Cool.
Plus the 4 old boxes, but they are all around the estate. We've got a circle of boxes there now.
But it's rather encouraging that there's nut hatches.
It is. It's very pleased to see them move in onto this box because it's much easier to look after it.
Yeah.
And because the nest is totally different to the others. It's all bits of broken leaves and bark. And also, you'll find as you lift the top where the birds have sealed around to keep the draft out with the mud. Also, sometimes if the entrance hole is too big, they'll adjust the size of that with mud to get it sort of a custom built up exactly as they want it.
How many are there?
7 chicks. 7 in there. And it's always been the case. The previous nut hatch success we've had in boxes, they've all been... No, there was one with 6 and all the others were 7 as well.
Really?
So, and you can tell that rarely can you come through this part of the estate without hearing that hatches calling or seeing them going up and down the trees.
I wonder where the parents are.
They won't be very far away because it's feeding quite well this morning. And down in the bottom of the woodland garden, we've got blue tit on 9 eggs there as well.
Really? What do you think this one's got in it? 12, is it?
I think it's the 9 young in this one now. There were 9 eggs laid, and I think they've all hatched out.
I can hear the mother getting...
The mother's up in the covey just behind us. She's a little bit anxious, but if we keep the disturbance down to a minimum, it doesn't... I've had no desertion through just handling the boxes and just checking them, counting the eggs.
Squashed one on top of the other.
Yes, it's very cosy in there.
How on earth she manages to feed them?
Well,
the ones at the bottom manage to come.
Well, there's plenty of food about now. On the sycamore leaves and the oak leaves, the caterpillars and aphids there, so they're keeping the populations of those pests down. Yeah. There she is. There she is now. She's a little bit anxious as to what we're going to do.
I don't blame her.
No. It's surprising how sometimes you can actually pick them off and discount them and put them back down, and they sort of cover up and carry on. But I think there's more likely to desert in the early stages when there's just 1 or 2 eggs there than. But when they've got young, I think the maternal instinct seems to be very strong with them, and as with all.
The female pheasant returns to her clutch of eggs to roll them. It takes some time. She's laid 17. As spring eases its way into summer, the grounds around Highgrove burst into colour. Even well-maintained formal ponds are useful for wildlife. A large female hawker dragonfly probes the moss for a suitable damp place to lay her eggs. The larvae will wriggle down into the water on hatching and prey upon tadpoles and other aquatic life for the next 2 years. The larvae are small, but formidable predators with more powerful jaws in proportion than any shark. A clean, healthy pond attracts a huge variety of animal and plant life. This pond is less than a year old and part of an entirely natural domestic sewage treatment process. Household sewage from Highgrove is pumped through tanks of bark chippings into a bed of Phragmites reeds. What's left behind in the bark chips can eventually be used as compost, while the roots of the reeds draw up the resulting soluble nutrients. Water trickles through the wall and into a bed of willows, where even more nutrients are taken up. When the water leaves the pool, it forms an extremely pure contribution to the local river system. It certainly provides a welcome bath for a wagtail and a drink on the wing for the swallows. The swallows are nesting in the hayloft next to the barn owls. Many generations of swallows have hatched, been raised, and have returned to breed under these rafters overlooking the stable yard. In the neighbouring loft, the barn owl eggs have all hatched, but because the eggs were laid over 10 days and incubated from the arrival of the first, there is a large disparity in the size of the hatchlings. The chicks hatch blind and naked. In the wild, if food was short, the smaller chicks would not survive and may even be eaten by the larger chicks. But here, there's plenty for all. In contrast, the chicks of the free-range chickens around the farm buildings hatch out with eyes open, fully mobile, and are covering a fluffy down, essential in the dangerous world of the farmyard. There's a strict pecking order among both the hens and cocks. One of the many dry stone walls provides a refuge for a whole array of wildlife, but this one is home to an unusual visitor. The tree creeper normally breeds in holes and crevices in trees, but this pair have chosen a crevice in the wall just outside Highgrove's walled kitchen garden. It was this 1-acre garden surrounded by high walls which first attracted Prince Charles to Highgrove. Everything within the walls was cleared before the transformation could begin. The prince has put his heart, soul, and back into the garden in both the design and execution of his plans. It's an ideal place to work, or sit, watch, and meditate. The koi carp were a gift from Yehudi Menuhin. The garden produce, all organically grown, is eaten at Highgrove and St. James's Palace. The formal gardens around the house have also been planned by the Prince himself, with the help of experts Rosemary Very and Lady Salisbury. A family of spotted flycatchers have taken up residence on one of the walls of the house. The gardens are a rich hunting ground for caterpillars and other insects. No pesticides are used here. A wealth of flowers blossom throughout the summer in the gardens and attract pollinating insects in search of nectar. The more wildflowers there are, the more insects, and the more insects, the more wildflowers. The honeybees carry the pollen back to the hive in the woodland garden. returning workers, still carrying their high-protein food, perform a dance in front of their co-workers. The way in which they dance conveys to the other bees the exact direction and distance of the best places to find ripe flowers. It's not just bees that rely on the flowers for food. There's a huge variety of butterflies here. Their colours are as bright and varied as the flowers they feed on. The thriving butterfly population is largely due to vast arrays of wildflowers established in the grounds. The paddocks have been planted with wildflower seed mixture to suit the soil around Highgrove. This is how many meadows would have looked in Gloucestershire before man invented weed killers. Back in the stable yard, the young prince's ponies are being fitted with a new set of shoes. Above, in the hayloft, the barn owl chicks are growing well and are now being monitored by closed-circuit television to cut down disturbance and prevent the chicks from getting too used to people.
The rain is not affecting the vole population in any adverse way for birds. Is it sort of a shortage of food, or what is causing the bad breeding season?
Well, the bad breeding season started long before
While Jemima and Tudor follow the progress of the chicks, John Hughes is ensuring that there is still an ample supply of food for the owls to feed on once they have been released. There have been many such trapping exercises, and the results show a healthy population of voles. This is an essential part of any release scheme. The voles sustain other predators too. Kestrels hover over the house and nest in the old trees in the paddocks. Tawny owls too rely heavily on rodents for food. A male sits outside his nest hole, while his mate sits with their chicks inside. The barn owl chicks are now well grown. They're being fed more frequently with dead mice rather than chicks, so they know what to look for when they begin to hunt for themselves. It will only be a matter of weeks before they will have to start finding their own food. That's why it's so important to ensure that there are plenty of rodents in the area. The rough, overgrown ground that's been deliberately left around arable fields and skirts the paddocks is known as headland, and is a rich hunting ground for the birds of prey and other predators. A family of foxes have an earth close to the house, and their cubs emerge to play in the long shadows of a June evening. Foxes are a natural controller of mice and voles, but too many foxes can be a problem for farmers, especially organic farmers, where there are no insecticides or herbicides and rodents flourish. Because herbicides aren't used on the farms, even the productive fields support a large variety of wildflowers. Obvious species like the poppy and tiny, easily overlooked flowers such as the wild pansy. The organic farmland, the headland that surrounds them, and the dry stone walls that border them are a vital haven for a whole variety of animal life that's threatened by modern agricultural methods. It's now high summer at Highgrove. The swallows have moved out of the hayloft, but are still feeding their fully fledged young close to the barn. The young swallows will have mastered the art of catching insects on the wing before they can head south to spend their first winter in Africa. It's now, too, that the wire on the window keeping the barn owls in the hayloft can be removed. At first, they are reluctant to stray too far from their familiar home, but as each day goes by, they wander further from the barn. Now they can repay all the effort that has been put into their release by helping to control the numbers of rodents in and around the farm buildings. So far, the program looks like being a success.
It's gone quite successfully, has it, the release program?
Yes, it has. One of the advantages here is that you've got headland, which barn owls desperately need. They need. It's not so much the nest sites; it's the foraging sites, and this what they call rank tussocky grass, as I'm told, is ideal. And we've lost so much of it over the last 30 years. I think it's 96% has gone.
Really, as much as that?
Which is horrendous. So with that, with luck, they'll do well. And the ones that we let go last year, the babies, as far as we know, have actually settled in one of your neighbouring farms.
They are pretty territorial anyway, aren't they?
Once they've established a territory, yes, they like to hang on to it, because obviously the longer they can hang on to it, the more successful that particular pair is going to be for breeding.
But if we're releasing them, the thing that always worries me about it is whether there is enough of the right sort of habitat for them.
Well, you're dead right, because unfortunately an awful lot of very well-meaning people have been releasing barn owls without doing anything about it. Here, because we've done a lot of work checking field voles, checking no one's using poisoning, and you've been organising your land with hedges, new hedges being planted, all of that helps the wildlife in general, and if it helps the short-tailed field vole, it helps the barn owl.
12 new hedgerows have been planted at Highgrove in recent years, providing vital nesting sites and flight corridors for small birds through big open fields. Some of the owls remain close to the house and hunt for rodents in the meadows. A young fox is becoming bold enough to investigate the gardens at the rear of the house. As daylight fades, some of Highgrove's other nocturnal inhabitants begin to emerge. The badgers will spend the night foraging for worms, rodents, seeds and fruits, and return to their sett in the early hours. The fox returns to the house to forage under the security lights. It's joined by another youngster from the nearby den. Friendly play fighting is giving way to true aggression. Finding food is still a serious business, even in this favourable environment. Paddy Whiteland, who's worked at Highgrove for 50 years, emerges to investigate the noise. Paddy not only oversees the stables, but just about everything else here as well. It's important with so many foxes about to keep the chickens locked up at night. They instinctively roost well off the ground, a throwback to the days when they roamed the forests of Asia before they were domesticated by man. At the dead of night, the stables attract other visitors. Hedgehogs play an important role in controlling garden pests, such as slugs and snails. At the formal pond, Paddy's torch picks out the great crested newts, which are difficult to see during the day. By now they have long finished breeding, and the adults are beginning to leave the water. The males have lost their flamboyant crests, and the females, having laid their 200 eggs, are looking much slimmer. They'll spend the autumn and winter on land, and return next spring to breed in the pond. As the early morning sun rises, the badgers return to their sett. Before bedding down for the day, the large cubs exercise their strength and growing muscles by play fighting. But they are much more gregarious than foxes, which disperse as they reach maturity. Prince Charles has been keen to preserve this particular sett, even though it's a potential hazard at harvest time. It has supported a large, healthy population of badgers for many years, as John Hughes explains.
Been up here for?
Oh, probably 100 years. It's a very old sett, very old sett. There's probably a mile of tunnels here. It goes right out into the wheat field out there.
Oh, yes.
Which is a problem farming, because the combine harvester with its heavy tank on it will probably drop down in and soon disappear underground.
Oh, I know. And I see they've been very busy. Is
Yes,
the bedding?
yes, this is the bedding that they change at night, especially when they've got cubs.
Yeah. And they got sort of special latrines.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
That's all on different runs around the periphery. They don't, once they get adult, they don't deposit their feces close to home.
Yeah.
A very clean animal.
And how many cubs do they turn?
Well, the most is about 4, but they average about 1.
Yeah.
And there's probably 3 or 4 here with the 2 families.
Yeah.
Their diet's very varied. They're quite partial to strawberries and carrots.
Otherwise, worms mostly.
Mostly, all the year round worms are available. Slugs and snails they do eat a few of.
And the odd baby rabbit.
Yes, and they're very interesting rabbits.
At harvest time, the combine drivers have to take great care not to catch a wheel in one of the many entrances to the sett. The harvest mouse that thrives here because of the absence of chemicals has to watch out too. It may look antiquated, but the binder plays an important role in the economy of the organic wheat farm. Organically grown wheat has much longer stalks than its chemically cultivated counterpart. It's much tougher too, and ideally suited to thatching. Organically grown wheat attracts a premium, but the yield is lower. At Highgrove, the income from an organic field is boosted by the simple reversal of modern technology. It is, however, labour-intensive and much safer for the harvest mice.
What sort of yield have we managed to get off this field this year?
We've had over a ton of...
Highgrove's farm manager, David Wilson, explains.
I mean, that's about the best we've had, isn't it, in the last few years since we started converting.
We've got the benefit of the rain this year, which has obviously helped. But 6 years in to the organic regime now. So
it's amazing. I can't believe that.
Very encouraging.
Yeah. But what I can't get over is the length of the stem.
It's ideally suited for thatching, isn't it? Yeah. It's perfect.
Yeah. And it is quite a good market, isn't it, for thatching quality straw?
There is, and people are now waking up to the fact that fertilised straw on their roof rots in about 6 or 7 years, but the organic stuff is the same as what was traditionally grown up until the war, at least, and will last for a generation.
Because we've all become so completely hooked on fertiliser, haven't we, on artificial fertiliser.
Very much
because
so.
many people perhaps don't realise what is involved in making the stuff in the first place.
No, they don't. Most people fail to realise that it takes 5 or 6 tons of oil to make a ton of fertiliser, which is not really very energy efficient.
It isn't, no.
It's now late summer, and the dairy cows are giving birth. Newly born calves are struggling to their feet. Unlike the plains-living horse, the cow is domesticated from a forest-living ancestor. And rather than keeping its offspring by its side at all times, the cow leaves it in the safety of the undergrowth, given the opportunity. Most farmers don't know this, and there's no cover in many fields. The calf emerges to feed, but has trouble locating the udder, which after years of breeding for milk production is now much more laden and lower down. But the calf is guided by age-old instincts. The most obvious feature of the Cotswold countryside is the dry stone walls, which are a haven for wildlife. Sadly, many have been removed or are in disrepair. Slowworms bask on the stones, warmed by the sun, and hunt for slugs and small snails. Inside the wall, a doe rabbit is giving birth, just as countless generations of rabbits have done here before her. Many of the walls are centuries old, and at times are prone to collapse. Mervyn Dart has spent his spare time restoring much of the dry stone walling around the Highgrove estate.
Mervyn, you're hard at it as usual.
Yes, yes.
You're getting on all right?
Yes, it's coming on.
It was just a collapse bit, wasn't it?
Yes, there was the rabbits had buried under this section.
But even a well-maintained wall still leaves holes and cavities. But where the rabbits find shelter, so too do their enemies. The weasel lives and breeds in the same walls. The sight of one of the fox cubs sends the rabbit scurrying to safety, or so the rabbit thinks. It's all part of the balance of nature, an essential natural check on rabbit numbers. A rabbit will either run or stay perfectly still at the sight of a fox. Provided it remains motionless, the rabbit is relatively safe. The fox has poor eyesight over long distances. Just as the numbers of rabbits need to be controlled at the hands of man or nature, then so too do the numbers of foxes. Fox hunting has its supporters and critics. It's a traditional way of controlling the numbers of foxes, which have virtually no natural predators. These are young foxhounds on their first run out, and that's just what it ends up being, a good run out. No fox is caught today. The summer flowers give way to mellower shades as autumn settles on Highgrove. The Red Admiral sips sugars from a rotting apple to see it through its winter dormancy. For the Prince, Highgrove is an attempt to produce a better model for our relationship with the natural world.
I maintain that the whole essence of life nowadays is of a short-term perspective, with no long-term outlook at all. I think it's so important, this business of trying to rediscover the importance of the natural cycle of things and work with the whole natural cycle, rather than constantly trying to turn the whole place into a factory which is so mechanical and artificial and doesn't actually allow for the vagaries of nature. Although organic farming is held up to be some kind of strange hocus pocus, it's not at all. It's merely trying to work with the whole natural system in a more sensitive way.
Prince Charles is searching for the best way to blend successful land management, which will sustain the health and quality of his land with modest profit. And he wants this man-made environment to be as natural a habitat as possible for wild animals and plants. In time, he hopes that what he's achieved here will be an example which other farmers and landowners may wish to follow, showing them that we needn't be at war with nature in the British countryside. Working with the natural rhythm of the land is the only way to ensure a long-term future, both for ourselves and the wild things that share our world.